shaping the narrative about Africa without us Africans participating in it directly is not going to happen. Everything that I knew about Eritrea came from Western media. I heard a lot about Eritrea on the BBC. I read about Eritrea in all the major Western newspapers. And I never heard or read a single positive thing about that country. I made my way to Asmara at some point. I just decided I wanted to go to Asmara and see Eritrea and talk to Eritreans and talk to Eritrean leaders and try to understand what kind of country is Eritrea. Now I can tell you that I came out of Eritrea feeling extremely angry. And I was angry about all the stuff that I had read about Eritrea and believed. But there are so many things that happen in Eritrea which I think are very good things that the rest of us in Africa should know about, but which no one tells us about.
Securing the strait and choking the vacuum. Why the US must break the ice with Asmara. US-Eritrea engagement enters a new strategic debate. The prospect of a diplomatic rapprochement between the United States and Eritrea, signaled by reports of Washington's intent to rescind long-standing executive sanctions, has ignited a fierce debate among so-called foreign policy analysts, historians, and regional specialists. Critics of this potential pivot argue from a well-established paradigm, that Eritrea is a uniquely recalcitrant state, structurally incapable of maintaining durable international partnerships, and that any engagement with the government of Eritrea is a fool's errand destined to repeat the failures of 1998 and 2018. This orthodox view maintains that Washington's strategic anxiety over the Red Sea is blinding it to the historical reality of Asmara's unreliability, the opacity of its decision-making, and the moral hazard of normalizing relations with a government defined by severe human rights deficits. It urges Washington to instead bypass the current administration entirely and invest its diplomatic capital in diaspora opposition movements to prepare for the future. However, this traditional critique suffers from an increasingly visible obsolescence. It relies on a foreign policy framework constructed during an era of unchallenged American hegemony, a period when Washington could afford to prioritize long-term ideological transformations and domestic governance standards over hard power security imperatives. In the contemporary, highly fragmented global order of the mid-2020s, that luxury no longer exists. The international arena has reverted to an era of intense great power competition and violent proxy warfare, where geographic access, maritime choke points, and denial strategies are the primary currencies of national security. When examined through the lens of strategic realism, the argument for keeping Eritrea in the diplomatic cold transforms from a principled stance into a severe geopolitical liability. A protracted policy of isolation does not freeze Eritrea in place. Rather, it creates a strategic vacuum on the western shore of the world's most critical maritime corridor, a vacuum that America's primary global and regional adversaries are eager to fill. A comprehensive rebuttal to the isolationist argument reveals that engagement with Eritrea is not an endorsement of its alleged internal governance, but a pragmatic, realist necessity dictated by an altered global order and a shifting balance of power in the Horn of Africa. To understand the necessity of this diplomatic pivot, one must first deconstruct the isolationist argument regarding the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Critics argue that because previous military interventions, such as Operation Rough Rider, failed to completely neutralize the Houthi threat in North Yemen, a relationship with Eritrea offers little practical utility. This perspective fundamentally misunderstands the nature of modern horizontal warfare and maritime denial. The geopolitical crisis in the Red Sea is no longer a localized conflict driven merely by regional insurgencies. It has evolved into a theater of state-sponsored disruption where Iran and its proxies utilize sophisticated anti-ship ballistic missiles and drone technology to threaten international commerce. In this highly volatile environment, the physical geography of the coastline becomes an absolute strategic factor. Eritrea possesses over 1,000 kilometers of coastline directly commanding the western flank of the Bab el-Mandeb. Leaving this coastline diplomatically unengaged means leaving it vulnerable to penetration by hostile powers. For over a decade, Russia has persistently sought naval logistics and repair facilities along the Red Sea, viewing the region as a critical link between its Black Sea Fleet and its broader ambitions in the Indian Ocean. Concurrently, China has consolidated its formidable military footprint in neighboring Djibouti, turning its first overseas naval base into a highly fortified node of intelligence gathering and power projection. If the United States maintains a posture of rigid isolation toward Eritrea, it practically guarantees that Eritrea will eventually be driven by economic desperation and security anxieties to grant naval access, radar installations, or electronic warfare facilities to Moscow or Beijing. A realist foreign policy recognizes that the US does not require Eritrea to become a flawless liberal democracy or an active military partner in Western coalitions. It simply requires Eritrea to act as a buffer that denies its territory, ports, and offshore islands to America's primary strategic competitors. In the calculation of great power competition, denial is often just as valuable as active alliance. Furthermore, the traditional argument against engaging Eritrea relies heavily on the historical memory of the 2018 diplomatic opening, noting that while the United Nations lifted its sanctions and senior American diplomats visited Asmara, the opening ultimately dissolved without producing institutional durability. While the historical facts of this episode are accurate, the analytical conclusion drawn from them is deeply flawed because it treats the regional conditions of 2018 as identical to those of today. The geopolitical landscape of the Horn of Africa has undergone a profound structural shift over the last several years. In 2018, the rapprochement between Eritrea and Ethiopia was built on a fragile, highly unsustainable agreement between the two governments, largely designed to isolate Ethiopian domestic rivals. That temporary alignment has since shattered, replaced by an era of profound regional volatility and a complete realignment of security priorities. The immediate catalyst for the current American diplomatic effort is not an attempt to replicate the naive optimism of 2018, but a calculated response to a much more dangerous international environment. The outbreak of direct military friction involving major powers in the Middle East has completely rewritten the strategic baseline. For an Eritrea facing renewed security anxieties and profound economic isolation, the structural incentives to seek a stable, predictable relationship with a global superpower have magnified significantly. The critique views President Isaias's public statements, specifically his insistence that engagement with the US must address wider regional frameworks rather than narrow bilateral issues, as proof of an impossible asymmetry. In reality, these statements are a standard opening gambit in a high-stakes diplomatic negotiation. Isaias's desire to discuss the broader regional architecture reflects his acute awareness that Eritrea's security is inextricably linked to the stability of its neighbors. By engaging with Eritrea on these terms, the US gains a valuable interlocutor capable of providing an alternative, highly informed perspective on the shifting dynamics of the Horn, breaking through the diplomatic echo chambers that have frequently compromised Western policy in the region. This necessity becomes even clearer when examining the profound decline of the traditional anchor of American policy in East Africa, the Potemkin government of Ethiopia. For decades, US strategic calculus in the Horn of Africa operated on the unquestioned assumption that Ethiopia, by virtue of its massive population, economic potential, and historical relationship with the West, was the natural and irreplaceable vehicle for American influence. The isolationist critique of the Eritrea pivot continues to rely on this legacy strategy, warning that drawing closer to Asmara will alienate Ethiopia and undermine Ethiopia's legitimate regional aspirations, including its pursuit of direct access to the sea. This position ignores the stark reality of contemporary Ethiopia, which has entered a period of severe internal fragmentation and systemic volatility. The devastating civil war in Tigray, followed by escalating, unresolved insurgencies in the Amhara, Oromia, and other regions, has severely degraded the authority and cohesion of the Ethiopian state. Moreover, under the current leadership in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia's foreign policy has become increasingly erratic and detached from Western strategic interests. The Prosperity Party has actively diversified its geopolitical alignments away from the United States and Europe, formalizing its entry into the BRICS bloc and pursuing unilateral, destabilizing diplomatic maneuvers. Chief among these was the controversial signing of a maritime memorandum of understanding with the breakaway region of Somaliland, an action that triggered intense diplomatic fury in Mogadishu, alienated regional neighbors, and heightened the risk of a new state-to-state conflict in an already overburdened neighborhood. To argue that Washington must freeze its relations with Eritrea to protect its standing with an increasingly volatile and unpredictable Ethiopia is to advocate for a dangerous single point of failure strategy. diversifying America's diplomatic portfolio in the Horn of Africa by establishing a functional channel to Eritrea is not an emotional abandonment of Ethiopia. It is a necessary, calculated correction that reduces US over-reliance on a single unstable state and provides the United States with multiple points of leverage in a highly volatile region. Critiques also raise alarms over the diplomatic role played by Egypt in facilitating the initial contacts between American officials and the Eritrean leadership, suggesting that Cairo is manipulating Washington into a regional axis designed to isolate Ethiopia over the long-standing dispute surrounding the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, GERD. This warning assumes an alarming degree of diplomatic naivete on the part of American policymakers, treating Washington as an unwitting pawn rather than a rational actor capable of managing complex, overlapping alignments. In the theater of international relations, it is entirely commonplace for regional powers to facilitate introductions that serve their own national interests. Egypt's desire to strengthen its alignment with Eritrea to counter Ethiopian unilateralism is a well-understood element of Nile Basin geopolitics. However, Washington's engagement with Eritrea does not require a blind subscription to Cairo's regional agenda. Instead, a formalized US-Eritrea dialogue provides Washington with a direct seat at the table where these northern flank security arrangements are being negotiated. Rather than being drawn into a rivalry it did not intend to enter, a sophisticated American diplomatic presence in Eritrea allows the United States to act as a stabilizing counterweight, dampening the potential for miscalculation between Cairo, Asmara, and Addis Ababa. If the US remains absent, the security architecture linking Egypt and Eritrea will develop entirely outside of American influence, likely taking on a much more aggressive, unrestricted character. By engaging Eritrea directly, the United States can incentivize restraint, ensure that regional security alignments remain defensive rather than offensive, and maintain its position as the ultimate arbiter of regional stability. A central pillar of the argument against normalization is the assertion that Eritrea's foreign policy is inherently erratic, characterized by rapid oscillations between disparate external patrons such as Israel, Iran, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Critics interpret this historical record of shifting alliances as definitive proof that Eritrea is a fundamentally unreliable partner that will inevitably betray any commitments made to the US. This analysis misinterprets a highly rational, survivalist foreign policy as mere caprice. As an exceptionally small state situated in a highly hostile neighborhood, facing a vastly larger neighbor that has historically questioned its right to exist as a sovereign entity, Eritrea has utilized diplomatic flexibility as an essential instrument of statecraft. Its shifts between external patrons have never been random. They have consistently been calculated responses to changing threats and shifting balances of power. When a state's primary objective is the preservation of its sovereign survival against existential threats, it cannot afford the luxury of rigid, sentimental alliances. This very opportunism, which critics cite as a barrier, is precisely what makes Eritrea accessible to skillful American diplomacy. It demonstrates that Eritrea's alignments are fundamentally pragmatic and responsive to shifts in material incentives. For a regime currently managing severe economic constraints, the prospect of a formalized, legal relaxation of American economic sanctions, combined with the international rehabilitation that accompanies regularized diplomatic ties with the world's superpower, represents a massive, tangible incentive. Washington possesses the economic and diplomatic currency necessary to alter Asmara's calculus, offering a degree of legitimacy and economic relief that neither Russia nor Iran can realistically replicate. To assume that the US will be treated with the same casual disregard as smaller regional patrons is to underestimate the unique, structural leverage that only the United States can deploy when it chooses to engage realistically. Beyond questions of regional alignment, the critique of normalization frequently points to the internal architecture of the Eritrean state. This argument conflates the criteria required for a values-based, institutional alliance such as those the US maintains with NATO members with the criteria required for a functional, interest-based strategic relationship. Throughout the history of modern American foreign policy, the US has frequently maintained highly effective, durable security partnerships with regimes when vital national interests demanded it. From the Cold War alignments with various micro-dictatorships to contemporary, transactional security relationships across the Middle East and Central Asia, strategic realism has always recognized that internal governance structures do not preclude external strategic cooperation. the transparency and accountability required for a joint military command or a deep economic integration agreement are not necessary for a relationship centered on maritime denial, airspace access, and basic intelligence sharing regarding regional proxy networks. To demand that Eritrea transform its internal governance system before the US will engage in basic strategic dialogue is to subordinate urgent, real-time national security requirements to an inflexible, ideological purity test. Such a posture ensures that American influence in the region will continue to contract, leaving the field entirely to adversaries who possess no such governance requirements and are more than willing to cooperate with centralized states exactly as they are. Finally, the alternative strategy proposed by critics of normalization, that the US should withhold engagement from the current administration and instead invest its long-term diplomatic capital, if any, in diaspora opposition movements, presents an extraordinary and uncalculated risk. While cultivating relationships with exile communities and political opposition figures is a standard element of a comprehensive, dual-track diplomatic strategy, elevating these diaspora groups to the primary pillar of US policy toward an active state is a recipe for strategic failure. History is replete with cautionary tales of Western capitals outsourcing their regional strategies to highly visible, articulate diaspora groups who possess significant influence in the US or UK but lack any measurable command structures, military backing, or institutional presence inside the territory they seek to govern. In a highly securitized, centralized state like Eritrea, the civilian and military institutions that will ultimately determine the trajectory of the future succession are located entirely within the country, concentrated among the people, internal security figures, military commanders, and regional administrators. By overtly backing a diaspora-based opposition front that calls for the immediate dismantling of the current state architecture, the US would effectively alienate the very internal actors who possess the actual power to manage a transition. Such a policy would signal to the internal Eritrean security establishment that any future relationship with the United States is an existential threat to their survival, driving them to harden their positions, increase their reliance on adversarial global powers, and resist any form of moderate internal reform. Furthermore, the assumption that a sudden, unmanaged collapse of the current regime driven by external pressure would lead to a stable, democratic transition is a dangerous delusion that ignores the immediate history of the region. The catastrophic fragmentation of state authority in nearby Libya, the protracted horror of the Syrian civil war, and the recent, devastating collapse of centralized authority in Sudan all offer stark, undeniable proof of what happens when a highly centralized state is abruptly decapitated without a stable, internally rooted security structure prepared to maintain order. In each instance, the vacuum was not filled by so-called liberal democratic reformers from the diaspora, but by fragmented warlords, radical insurgencies, and predatory external interventions. In the context of the Red Sea, where a stable, predictable coast is a vital interest for international shipping and global security, triggering or encouraging a chaotic state collapse in Eritrea would be an act of geopolitical malpractice. A durable American relationship with Eritrea must be oriented toward stability, meaning that the US must establish functional, working channels with the individuals who currently hold authority on the ground, using those channels to subtly incentivize a managed, stable transition process from within when the inevitable leadership succession arrives. In conclusion, the debate over whether Eritrea can be brought back from the diplomatic cold must be stripped of ideological sentimentalism and evaluated strictly on the basis of national interest and strategic necessity. The traditional policy of absolute isolation has run its course, yielding no positive changes in Eritrea's internal governance while actively damaging America's strategic posture in an increasingly vital maritime corridor. In an era defined by a hot war in the Red Sea, a fragmented and unstable Ethiopia, aggressive naval maneuvers by Russia, and a permanent Chinese military presence in East Africa, the United States cannot afford to leave 1,000 kilometers of vital coastline in a diplomatic vacuum. A cautious, highly realistic, and conditional normalization of relations with Asmara cautious, highly realistic, and conditional normalization of relations with Asmara provides Washington with an essential tool for adversary denial, diversifies its regional alignments, and provides a necessary counterweight to the volatility of the Horn of Africa. This approach does not require an endorsement of Eritrea's domestic policies, nor does it require a naive belief that the government of Eritrea will transform into a conventional Western ally. It requires only the sober realization that in a dangerous and contested world, a functional relationship with a difficult, strategically placed state is vastly superior to a policy of rigid exclusion that hands the keys of a vital global choke point to America's primary geopolitical rivals. The strategic investment for Washington lies not in waiting for a hypothetical, diaspora-led revolution, but in actively engaging the reality of the Horn of Africa as it exists today, protecting its maritime interests, and ensuring that the United States remains an indispensable actor in the region's present and future. By David Yer. May 18, 2026.
እቲ ዝበዝሕ ዕድል ዘሎ ብዛዕባ መጻኢ ዕድሉ ዘይጠራጠር ኣብ ጸልም ኣፍሪቃ ምሕራል ኮይኑ እቲ ዝበለጸ ክመጽእ ዝብል ኤርትራ ጥራሕ ሰብ ትቀበሎ ኣይትቀበሎ እወሓጠላ ኣይወሓጠላ እቲ ዝበለጸ ተስፋ ዘሎ መጻኢ ብሩህ ዕድል ናተ እዩ ዝብል ህዝቢ ኤርትራ ጥራሕ
The UAE wants to sit on the same seat as Saudi Arabia. So UAE invite Trump and they tell him, how much did bin Salman give you? $1 trillion. I'll give you $1.4 trillion. And exchange dollars into Mohammed bin Salman. And when I present my plan to split Sudan, to make a new state with Niala in the west as the capital, because my militia Himeti was unable to take the capital Khartoum, I want you to recognize it. When I split Libya into two, and Haftar now has set up his administration in Benghazi in the east, Biden was unwilling to recognize. I want you to recognize Haftar as an independent state, or at least give him respite until he's able to take Tripoli again and bring the whole country under his authoritarian regime.
Commander who was filmed killing civilians in Sudan is back in combat, sources say. The Rapid Support Forces quietly released a UN-sanctioned commander, 9 sources told Reuters, without a public accounting of a promised probe into his actions. The RSF denies setting Abu Lulu free, calling the reports completely false. A Sudanese paramilitary commander who was arrested late last year following global outrage over videos of him executing unarmed people in Al-Fashir has been released from prison and returned to active duty on the battlefield, 9 sources told Reuters. 2 of the sources, a Sudanese intelligence official and a commander with the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, said they personally saw RSF Brigadier General Al-Fatah Abdullah Idris, known as Abu Lulu, on the battlefield in Kurdistan in March. RSF officers had pleaded for Abu Lulu to be returned to the field to boost the morale of forces engulfed in heavy fighting there, a Chadian military officer told Reuters. In total, Reuters spoke with 13 sources who said they knew of Abu Lulu's release. They include 3 RSF commanders, an RSF officer, a relative of Abu Lulu, a Chadian military officer close to RSF command and 7 other sources with contacts in RSF leadership or access to intelligence on RSF field operations. The RSF-led coalition government, in response to questions from Reuters, issued a statement on Monday denying the group had released Abu Lulu. A special court will try him and others accused of violations during the Al-Fashir offensive, according to the statement from Ahmed Tagudlisan, spokesman for the RSF-led Tassis government. The talk about Abu Lulu being released is untrue, malicious, and completely false, the statement said. Abu Lulu and the others accused of violations during the liberation of Al-Fashir have been in detention since their arrest and have never left prison. Reuters was unable to reach Abu Lulu. The RSF imprisoned Abu Lulu in late October 2025, a few days after its bloody takeover of Al-Fashir, a large city in North Darfur. Multiple videos had surfaced of him executing unarmed people during the offensive. His actions earned him the nickname, the Butcher of Al-Fashir, a moniker noted by the UN Security Council when sanctioning him on February 24 for human rights abuses. The 3-year civil war between the Sudanese army and the RSF is a brutal power struggle to control the country and its financial resources. It has created what aid groups say is the world's largest humanitarian crisis. Earlier this year, an independent UN probe found that the mass killings in Al-Fashir bear the hallmarks of genocide. A separate UN probe found more than 6,000 people were killed by RSF fighters from October 25 to 27. Online videos verified by Reuters show Abu Lulu near a trench outside Al-Fashir on October 27, after the RSF seized the city. Social media obtained by Reuters. 4 videos verified by Reuters show Abu Lulu shooting at least 15 unarmed captives in Al-Fashir on October 27, after the RSF seized the city. All were wearing civilian clothing. It is considered a war crime under international law to kill anyone, even a former fighter, who is unarmed and not posing a threat. After international outcry by UN leaders, US politicians and others. RSF leader Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemedti, publicly acknowledged violations by his fighters in Al-Fashir and said an accountability committee would be set up to investigate any abuses. On October 30th, the RSF released a video of Abu Lulu being driven to Shala prison, in southwestern Al-Fashir. In the video, a handcuffed Abu Lulu is escorted from a vehicle flanked by armed men and placed behind bars. An unidentified RSF spokesperson standing in front of the prison says Abu Lulu will be presented to a just trial in accordance with the law. A video released by the RSF on October 30th shows Abu Lulu being placed into a cell at Shala prison, in southwestern Al-Fashir. Social media obtained by Reuters. In November, Al Jazeera published a story saying Abu Lulu had been released, citing unspecified online videos. But on December 2nd, the head of the RSF-appointed accountability committee told Reuters that it had Abu Lulu in custody and was investigating him and several other RSF soldiers in connection with violations committed in Al-Fashir. Al Jazeera did not respond to questions from Reuters about its November report. 4 sources told Reuters Abu Lulu was released in December. Reuters was unable to confirm when he was freed. The relative said that before Abu Lulu was authorized to return to duty in Kurdistan, he appeared in November before a disciplinary board made up of 6 senior officers. The hearing was about videos he appeared in that damaged the RSF's reputation. Reuters was unable to confirm the hearing took place or determine its outcome. Abu Lulu is from the same clan as Hemedti, the RSF leader. Hemedti's brother, Abdulrahim Dagalo, the deputy commander of the RSF, personally ordered Abu Lulu's release from prison, according to 3 sources: an RSF commander and an RSF officer both close to RSF leadership and a researcher with contacts in the committee tasked with investigating Abu Lulu. The RSF officer said that the disciplinary committee had not officially released Abu Lulu but that the deputy commander had ordered his release via radio message. Command responsibility. During the RSF's takeover of Al-Fashir, hundreds of videos were posted online. Many depicted violence against people who appeared to be unarmed. Social media obtained by Reuters. The videos of Abu Lulu are among nearly 300 videos posted online around the time of the offensive and analyzed by Reuters and the Sudan Witness Project at the Center for Information Resilience. Abu Lulu was the only commander Reuters identified in video shooting unarmed people. But the Reuters Sudan Witness investigation also found that 3 other senior RSF commanders were in the same area when the mass killings took place. A video verified by Reuters and Sudan Witness shows Gedo Hamdan Abu Nashak, RSF commander for North Darfur, was in the area around the time Abu Lulu was killing unarmed people. The 2 were walking together within 40 meters of 2 of the executions. Social media, VANTOR via Reuters. One video verified by Reuters shows Gedo Hamdan Abu Nashak, the highest-ranking RSF commander for the region of North Darfur, walking alongside Abu Lulu on the morning of October 27. Reuters geolocated videos from this area and found that Nashak was recorded within 40 meters of 2 other videos that showed Abu Lulu executing unarmed men. By measuring shadows in the 3 videos, Reuters found that the videos were filmed within the same 2-hour window. Under international law, these leaders may be held criminally liable for crimes committed by their fighters during the conflict, said Jahan Henry, a human rights lawyer and Sudan director at the Reckoning Project, a U.S. nonprofit that documents war crimes. The RSF did not respond to questions about the specific actions of any commanders present during the Al-Fashir offensive. On October 29, Hemedti said that any soldier or officer who committed a crime would be arrested and investigated, with the results publicized. The RSF government has been delayed in trying those accused of violations, spokesman Listen said, because it is establishing state structures under difficult circumstances. We are committed to achieving justice and holding all those who commit violations accountable, Listen said. Any talk to the contrary is deliberate misinformation. Witness accounts. Reuters spoke with 6 survivors in refugee camps in Chad who said they witnessed Abu Lulu killing civilians in Al-Fashir before they fled in October 2025. Manazal Musa, 25, recognized Abu Lulu from videos shown to her by a Reuters reporter and said she met him on the road out of Al-Fashir as she and her family were fleeing. There, she said, he took their phones and all their belongings, beat them severely and shot and killed her brother, Mubarak. Manazal Musa, 25, and her sister Khadija, in blue, recognized Abu Lulu as the man who had beaten them and killed their brother in videos shown to her by a reporter at the Tyne Transit Refugee Camp, in eastern Chad, November 23, 2025. Reuters, Syed Shisha. Abu Lulu is the one who abused us, she said. He was the one who killed Mubarak. He is the one who killed our families and killed our husbands. Medina Adam, 38, said Abu Lulu entered Al-Fashir University on October 27, where she was sheltering with other civilians, and started to kill women and children. She described one moment when Abu Lulu asked a pregnant woman how many months along she was, and when she responded, 7 months, he shot her 7 times in her stomach with his gun. The same scene was described by 2 witnesses in a UN report published in February. Adam said Abu Lulu then asked a group of 10 children to sit on the ground and forced them to chant RSF slogans while he filmed. The children asked not to be killed, she said, but he shot all 10 of them. Secrecy ordered. An RSF commander said leadership ordered other officers to keep quiet about Abu Lulu's return to combat. A different RSF commander and the relatives said Abu Lulu was released on the condition that he not film or be filmed on the battlefield. Reuters has not found any images of him in action since his release. He has been free for about 3 or 4 months and is on the battlefield with his troops, said one RSF commander, who declined to be named. Abu Lulu's relatives said the RSF needed the commander's services because its forces are struggling. After cementing control of Al-Fashir, the RSF shifted its offensive eastward into the Kurdistan region, between its territory and army-held areas. It has faced intense fighting there. He is very popular with the troops and that's good for their morale, the relative said. A video recorded and posted online on November 1, 2025 by Salar Abdin Mohammed Azala, an RSF officer who goes by the nickname, Desert Shield, on Facebook, where he had 210,000 followers before his account was deleted. Social media obtained by Reuters. In several videos verified by Reuters and Sudan Witness, other RSF fighters praise Abu Lulu and his killings. In one, filmed and posted online on November 1, 2025, by Salar Abdin Mohammed Azala, an RSF fighter, Azala says many fighters are ready to take Abu Lulu's place. If Abu Lulu disappeared, or you arrested him or tried him, we are all 1,000 Abu Lulus, he says, speaking to the camera. I too am Abu Lulu. By Reed Levinson, Mahamat Ramadan and Julia Paravicini. May 18, 2026.
share, like, subscribe ምግባር ኣይትረስዑ. Thank you.